There it is. You can see it. It is Blonde. It was released in theaters, and because I am such a nerd, I decided to see it in theaters. Hello everyone, this is Kevin T. Rodriguez, film critic of iCritic.net. This is an out of the theater reaction. So, Andrew Dominik's Blonde has been met with quite a little bit of controversy. Aside from the fact that it is one of the rare films to receive an NC-17 rating, the movie has come under fire for basically rehashing Marilyn Monroe's abuse. This is a movie about Marilyn Monroe and the tough life she lives. And there's been some debate whether or not filmmakers should be allowed to make movies of such topics, especially since Marilyn is no longer here to speak for herself. She was used and abused in life. People consider a movie like this using and abusing her in death. As a film critic, that is not my decision to make, nor do I have any words. All I can do is talk about the movie itself, whether artistic choices were done well, and whether or not they worked, and if it is a functioning movie. So here's my thoughts on Blonde. I believe Blonde is a mess, if I am being perfectly frank. This isn't so much a movie as it is a capture of chaos. In fact, it is so chaotic that for the first couple hours, I was wondering why the movie was going from color to black and white, to the 1:33 aspect ratio, to the 1:85 aspect ratio, to the CinemaScope, really almost randomly and without discretion. And then I realized, oh yes, this is part of the chaos of Marilyn Monroe's life, like reality and the dream world, or the lines between Norma Jean and Marilyn seem to get blurred. And they are blurred early on, and they are blurred very frequently. And that is just part of the nauseating side effects of Blonde. It also doesn't necessarily make Marilyn nor Norma Jean a person. More or less, they are just, this is just someone who things happen to her, and maybe that is her life. Maybe she grew up feeling like she was never really in control of her own life. I mean, that is kind of one of the big things that seem to bother her. But for the audience, it's like we're not sympathizing with Marilyn Monroe so much as we are witnessing her abuse. Now, the NC-17 rating is interesting because while I don't think it's a very sexually explicit film, there is some nudity and there are a couple of brief sex scenes, but I have honestly seen a lot worse in R-rated movies. But the tone of the movie is so brutal. It is incredibly rough to watch, and it kind of doesn't leave you with a good feeling. And maybe that is the point. Maybe Blonde is supposed to be, hey, this is how it really is, and it was rough and it was not fun, and it was deliberately made to not have a lot of joy. Now, if that is the way it was intended, and I can definitely see why the director would want to do something like that, then in many ways it was successful at what it set out to do. That said, it doesn't mean the movie is very interesting to watch. And I also believe at 2 hours and 46 minutes, this is way too long. It's way too long. I think the same point could have been made had they cut 25 minutes out of the movie. I don't see why it had to be almost 3 hours long. I don't begrudge long movies. I welcome long movies as long as they can justify being as long as they are. But considering the lack of the overall narrative, where it's just this girl has an abusive mother, grows up with father issue complexes, and becomes famous and kind of has a complexity with her own fame and how people relate to her. That's all interesting, but there's no real overarching story. It's just things happen, and you find yourself getting a little burnt out with the whole thing after an hour or so. So at 2 hours, I probably was ready to get out of there. At almost 3 hours, it was like, my gosh, I wish I was watching this on Netflix so I could pause it, come back later. So overall, I would give, at least at the moment, I will post my printed review below when I write it, Blonde a Gosh, I hate to do it because there are so many things that were well made about it, but I'm going to give it 1 star. It just was not very fun to watch, and it was not. I mean, it was interesting, it was complex, it was artistically daring. It just wasn't. It just doesn't do anything for you. You just feel blah after it's done. And I know some movies are supposed to make you feel like that, but you know, I can walk out feeling blah and inspired at the same time. I was just ready for it to be over, to be honest. So anyway, that is the review, the Out of the Theater review. Again, keep an eye out for my printed review. Once again, I like to know if you've seen it, what do you think of it? Comment below, like, favorite, share, subscribe, and as always, flame responsibly. Have a good one.